In our pre-election series of handy guides to understanding the big election issues, this week's agenda looks at health and social care. Most of the candidates seem to think that Manx Care is the problem rather than the solution, and with the eye-watering amounts being poured into health, they may have a point. Alistair Ramsey joins me in the studio, and with the new UK Prime Minister promising to spend a lot of political capital on a better solution for care home funding, it seems big changes lie ahead.
Yes, and I think we have looked at this on the island, haven't we? Looking at the options to get round that, which is perceived to be a very unfair arrangement, that people, basically lose their property. And I think where they ended up was looking at some kind of hybrid arrangement where the amount of property or value you would lose would be at least capped, which presumably implies some kind of increased payment from the state.
Yes, and ultimately, all the attempts so far as the Manx government is concerned have not been met with success. And what Andy Burnham is reportedly saying is he is going to invest a lot of political capital into trying to find a solution whereby people can at least retain a reasonable part of their wealth by way of housing and money, so that, I don't know, possibly some kind of insurance system will be introduced that will mean that everyone pays a bit, but ultimately when you desperately need that sort of care, it will be available to you at a much reduced cost.
Yeah. Yes, and that brings us back to the whole health and social care issue in the Isle of Man. I keep saying we've kind of reached a crossroads, and I every 5 years I say that, but I think we have, in terms of how you fund the health and social care going forward, and I worry that everyone's fixated on Manx Care as being the entire problem, and clearly there may be things that you could do to streamline Manx Care and make it more efficient. But if people think that that's the only problem, then they're deluding themselves.
Well, they are really. I mean, the number of manifestos that I've read, and I've read quite a few in preparation to do some of the interviews that I've been doing for the election. Most of those manifestos reference health, reference the need for significant reform or reviews or investigations into Manx Care. Manx Care is not working. We need a new a rethink, and Manx Care's hardly got its feet under the table, really. I mean, it's only was it 5-6 years old? 5
years old now,
and of course it was set up to solve problems that we had.
It was the solution. It was the outcome of a major review by an off-island expert. But I mean, that off-island expert and others have always said, look, you're going to have to look at the funding longer term, because there are issues inevitably increasing costs. I mean, there's a big question mark, even in the UK model, of whether a tax-funded National Health Service is sustainable. A lot of experts in the UK say it isn't. In the Isle of Man, it's even more critical, because we don't have the economies of scale that the UK have. We have to pay to transport people on and off the island. So there are all sorts of costs bubbling up there that to keep just loading that on the tax base isn't sustainable.
And particularly when the economy doesn't appear to be in having any sign of vigorous growth at the moment. And of course, growth in the economy would allow more money to be made available to things like healthcare spending. But when that's not really happening, you have to look quite seriously at what we're doing. And of course, the one thing that politicians daren't say, particularly in the run-up to an election, is that maybe we need to look at the whole at the point of delivery model that we have at the moment and question whether that is sustainable into the future, because that is not a popular thing for people to say.
It wouldn't be, but it would be honest, and maybe they'd get some credit for their honesty. And I think saying that we just need a broader review of health service funding is a reasonable thing to say, and that would then roll into the whole tax system, because it's a big part of government's expenditure, and I guess it's a big part of why there's a gap between income and expenditure. So I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say, that we want people to have the best care, we want a fair system, and look at other systems around the world and other models and how viable they might be. I don't think people would have much patience for endless reviews. So if you were going to conduct this exercise, you would have to do it reasonably swiftly. So you could get on with stuff. But a recognition that it's not just Manx Care, I think, would be welcome.
The Isle of Man mirrors what we do in the UK, and on the one hand we have candidates saying we shouldn't just copy UK policies, and then on the other hand, but the most expensive thing that we do copy, we have to absolutely retain. There's a certain amount of irony in that. But Jersey, for example, has a different system in place, doesn't it? They rely on health insurance of some sort.
They've a lot more health insurance. I think you have to pay to see a GP in Jersey. So the GPs are completely private. They have apparently they have a health, for residents, they have a health card, which means you get subsidised visits to the GP, but it's still, I think, 40, 50 quid a visit. So,
actually, on that particular one, there are loads of examples that we could potentially pick, but I did have the benefit of being in both council of ministers and for a brief time in the Department of Health and Social Care as a member responsible for health, and doctors were very happy to say to us, look, part of the problem that we face is because it's free, people don't respect the service in the way that they might if they had to pay a small amount to it. So we regularly get appointments where patients don't turn up.
A lot of those.
We have situations where patients basically are turning up to be told that they need to take an aspirin, that kind of thing. And perhaps if you knew you had to pay £10-15 every time you went to the doctor, you would be more inclined to take that visit perhaps a little bit more seriously. That was the general advice that we would get from various medical experts as politicians. But it would take a bold politician to decide, actually, you know what, we do need to start charging for medical appointments.
I think the trick would be not to do that in isolation, but to frame it as part of a broader debate. And what we're not very good at doing in the Isle of Man, and lots of places aren't good at this, is we tend to come up with challenging solutions without convincing people first what the problem is and explaining what the problem is. So I think you have to make it part of a broader conversation about the future of health services and tax, present people with the options, and this is what we have to do, because the alternative is constant struggling. The alternative is not sustainable, but you have to explain that, and I think that's where Treasury went wrong with its health levy proposal, which was kind of justifiable in the scheme of things, but was very narrow and just kind of came out of the blue. And
ultimately, people thought this was just a clever ruse to put up income tax, because effectively that's what was going on.
It was an additional tax.
So you mentioned there the fundamental problems, the issues. So maybe we should look at those, and I guess one of those issues is advancements in medical science, which mean that more and more things are treatable. It is more possible to extend people's lives for much longer because of the advancements in medical science. Another of the problems that the healthcare system faces is we are leading on the whole less healthy lifestyles. And then, of course, you run into the argument, we shouldn't allow the nanny state to tell us how we should live.
Yeah.
And yet, that's a significant cost to the health service when people's lives result in more medical complaints.
Yes, I mean, there is a nanny state, and the NHS is the nanny state. Mm. So, you're getting free treatment effectively. So, maybe nanny state also has to tell you to live healthily. Whether that works or not, I don't know. But yes, I mean, we have the ageing population. That's the big pressure. People are living longer, and then it's the older population who disproportionately need healthcare, which is understandable. There's just the cost of drugs and treatments. I think, healthcare inflation runs far ahead of regular inflation. In the Isle of Man, as said before, we have additional costs. We don't have the economies of scale. I mean, I don't know how much we pay just to send people back and forward to Liverpool and so on, but that must be pretty considerable.
Yes, and again, one of the things that has been talked about for a very long time, and I guess is probably by now starting to take shape to a greater extent, is telemedicine. Basically, the ability to have consultants sitting in their offices in England, talking to you and discussing your complaints when they could be speaking to you directly face to face if you went away to visit them, but actually the video call is probably quite sufficient in the vast majority of cases. So that was something that was being discussed. Also, the ability for experts in various medical fields to be able to help in terms of some of the operations and things happening in Noble's Hospital through things like Skype calls. I think Skype's defunct now, isn't it? But those sorts of things, those were things that the Isle of Man was supposed to be leading on in relation to the British Irish Council, and I don't know. I haven't heard very much for a while about that. So
no.
I guess that means that everything is going along extremely well and they don't need to report on it.
I doubt that very much, actually, yes. And I suppose, I'm not a health services expert at all, but I guess when you've got services here and in the UK that are really going flat out and really struggling to cope with the day job, getting people to find the kind of bandwidth to move to these new systems must be really challenging. And you may need to set these things up. You may need some new investment at a time when you're being told you can't go over your budget.
And of course, the other big constraint, which is very evident in many areas, particularly in social care, maybe not quite so much in healthcare, but certainly in social care, is availability of staff. And as a result of some of the changes that have occurred subsequent to Brexit happening, it has become more difficult to recruit staff. And we'll move into a debate on another occasion about borders and immigration and security. But that, of course, is another constraint on the health service.
Yeah, and if you can't get permanent staff, then you pay agencies, and that costs a lot more. And that's another major challenge for them, apparently.
So there are places in the world that have quite successful health services. I mean, you've been doing a little bit of digging and looking at things.
Yes, a very cursory, but I mean, it appears that there are obviously different, broadly speaking, different models. The NHS is a tax-funded model where, it all comes from income tax, other taxes, and some national insurance. I think people think that we're already in an insurance scheme because we pay NI, but it appears that only a relatively small amount of the health services budget over here comes from national insurance. That's just a relatively small chunk.
And of course, that national insurance, the description was probably an incredibly clever bit of politicking back in the day when the NHS was formed, and to try and allow people to think that things haven't changed an awful lot, just that we've developed a national health insurance scheme.
But
and yet, as you say, in effect, it's just a tax. It's just another form of tax.
It is a kind of tax on employment, and the vast bulk of it goes for paying the state pension and benefits. But so the tax-funded system is the NHS model in the UK, the Isle of Man, and some other kind of Commonwealth countries. But they may also have more user charges as well. Then there's the social insurance model in places like France and Germany, where employers and employees pay into a kind of publicly run sickness fund, which then pays for your treatment and you get paid back and so on. And they are regarded as pretty successful examples, I think.
And whereabouts?
Places like France and Germany. I mean, they're all different, and they have different elements of user charges. But basically, if you were to do that here, you'd be putting it is a kind of fresh tax on employment. So how you would, and people would say, well, we're already paying, and so it would be very challenging to get it through. Then you've got the pure private model, like the US, where everyone, if you want healthcare, you have to sort your own private insurance out, and there's a very basic kind of state-funded fallback, Medicare, which is probably not terribly good.
But better than nothing.
Better than nothing. I do think that, we've reached the point where we do need to look broadly at what the options are and to have that broad debate and to look again at our tax system generally. And the problem is in the Isle of Man, it is almost taboo to talk about changing the tax system because we're a low tax economy. And if you talk about in any way increasing tax, we're frightened of kind of scaring away the business. Now, if that's really true, we're kind of paralysed, really. And other places rely on a kind of low. You're not talking about going to extreme high tax, but there must be some scope to look at changing the system a bit.
Yeah. Well, and we will look at that again in another. We're going to have that many programmes. I wonder whether we'll fit them all in.
We'll still be going in 4 years' time. Yeah.
But in terms of health, I mean, we have a situation, for example, where the Scotland has quite a markedly different system to England and Wales and the Isle of Man. I'm not sure about Northern Ireland, but I imagine similar there. Where effectively people don't pay for prescriptions. I mean, that's even when I was member for health, that would have been 20 years ago. I think that was possibly something in the region of a £15 million cost, and over that time, that 15 million will have massively increased. But Scotland think that that's the right thing to do.
They do, and I guess it's because they can do that with perhaps not bearing the full cost of it because they're getting subsidised by England. And I say that as a former member of the Scottish National Party.
Yes, and I'm sure the Scottish National Party would argue differently, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but I mean, prescriptions are one of the things that need to be looked at as part of the broader package. It's interesting that a while ago the health minister said, don't worry, we won't be looking at prescriptions until after the general election. which was a kind of honest recognition of how difficult it is.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of anomalies. Most of us, when you get past a certain age, are consuming huge quantities of drugs, free, because just by virtue of our age.
And then, of course, that brings us on to another element to this. We have become, we can treat so many illnesses now with most imaginative and intelligent drugs and treatments. But I'll use an anecdote. I remember my dad went into A&E a year or so ago, and the doctors asked him, well, give us a list of all the medicines that you're on. And basically, he had a painkiller because he's got a few gammy legs, and that was it. And they said, well, that's probably why you've lived to the ripe old age that you are at, because there is an argument that maybe there's so many medicines being pumped into people's bodies now that that's causing some unforeseen side effects, because that each medicine is designed to treat specific things, and when you have a mix of all this going on, that maybe things are causing other problems that weren't foreseen.
Yes, I'm sure it does happen, and I think that the medical profession now, because they're aware of the dangers of kind of litigation, that you're never going to go to the doctor and then say, you'll probably be okay, don't worry about it. They have to do something. That's understandable.
And of course, the one bit of health that we've not, well, there's probably several, but one of the bits of health that we haven't touched on so far is mental health, which is apparently a very, very significantly expanding issue with not sufficient resource to actually deal with. And part of that seems to be the dependencies that are caused by social media these days, and various other changes in society, which are leading to more and more people having more and more significant mental health problems, because people's interaction with society tends to be done more and more through social media than actual face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, and I think the island has been playing catch-up on mental health services because it just hasn't been recognised for what it is. Same in the UK. As you say, social media, all sorts of aspects of modern life that make it a kind of more anxious place to live for some reason.
Yes, I mean, the ability for people to scare the pants off you on social media is there. People, there's less reliance on properly researched journalism than there used to be, and rumours can spread and fly around through social media, which, as you say, causes a significant amount of anxiety among people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the way the traditional media worked was always to engage people's attention by focusing on the negative. So there's nothing new about just grabbing of attention. That the bad news sells was the thing, but then social media has just amplified that, and it's kind of in your head, in your face all the time.
So basically, what we seem to have identified is an expansion of the remit, I suppose, of the health and social services. There's an awful lot more for them to have to deal with. There's an awful lot more available technologies, medicines to treat problems. We've got constraints in relation to the numbers of people who can actually come into the Isle of Man who have the skills to do the jobs that are required. And we seem to have a never-ending stream of increasing budgets in pretty much every area that in terms of health and social care. It doesn't sound like an easily solvable picture.
And all this against the backdrop of a low-tax economy. And this was always the big challenge. How does the Isle of Man have a low-tax economy and a high public spending kind of welfare state model? And we got away with it for years because of the largesse of the little VAT racket that was running for a long time.
And
perfectly legally, I would like to point out.
Yes,
but,
potentially we're going to have, certainly 100 candidates standing in this forthcoming election. Are we expecting to see lots of innovative solutions in manifestos?
I don't think so. I don't think you can expect. I mean, one of the beauties of the Manx system, but one of its failings, is that the political recruits are just ordinary people off the street. So you can't expect those people to have detailed policy solutions. But you can expect them to have done their homework, I think, and to kind of have this recognition. You know, if they're just selling this thing, make Manx Care the scapegoat for everything, then they are extremely short-sighted and probably shouldn't be in national government.
Well, sadly, that's us out of time on health and social care. I'm sure we'll return in the not-too-distant future with another, advisory podcast or programme to give some thought as to the issues that the election candidates will be facing. That was Alistair Ramsey. So what do you think? Are you happy to pay more tax to fund the health service? Are there really too many bureaucrats in the health service and not enough doctors? Would you pay extra towards a care home insurance fund so you don't end up selling your assets to pay for care in later life? Anyone offering easy solutions in this election is unlikely to have the real answer, I fear. I'm Phil Gorn. Go to my house on Geistach Rum. Thanks for listening.